This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz, coming to you live, well, sort of, from HORRORCON LA 2023, spooking the Los Angeles Convention Center in downtown LA. We had a monstrously good time meeting fans, signing autographs, taking pictures, and hey, just plain hanging out. We also did a couple of panels where How Not to Make a Movie podcast style, we talked about how we soared making Tales from the Crypt, and then crashed and burned making Bordello of Blood. I also had the pleasure of moderating a panel for the CHIODO Brothers, who are celebrating the 35th anniversary of their cult classic Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which MGM is about to publish as a computer game. Bravo, CHIODO's Charles, Stephen, and Edward. If you've never been to a horror convention, you absolutely should. They're a scary good time. There's a great vibe to them because the horror community is made up of the sweetest people on planet Earth. But, okay, there is something weird about it all. As you look around, you notice everyone's dressed up as Freddy Krueger or Jason or Leatherface, for instance, but no one ever dresses up as any of their victims. Weird, huh? Except it makes total sense. The monsters are the empowered ones. They have all the fun. Just my opinion, but I think that's why horror fans embrace horror so passionately. Because it empowers them. The whole phenomenon began with Star Trek fans, Trekkies, which we talked about right here on the How Not to Make a Movie podcast with our guest Roger Nygaard. But back to HORRORCON LA. Our crypt panel consisted of
at the very end, that's Ed Tapia.
Now, a super successful producer in his own right. Ed produces Everyone's All-American for the CW. But back then, the greatest assistant a movie or TV producer could ever have.
And to my immediate left is my partner in crime, Gil Adler. To my immediate right is the incredible Sherrie Rose.
Thank you, guys.
You know, on Tales from the Crypt, most actors were one and done. We'd hire them and we'd get the best work out of them, and that'd be the end of them, one way or the other. And then we met Sherrie Rose, and we hired Sherrie 3 times. Twice on 2 episodes, and we hired her to do Demon Knight, too.
Thank you.
At the end is TODD Masters. His name says it all. One of the makeup special effects masters of all. Wow. This is amazing.
We should have seen him before we got to the stage.
Crypt Keeper, right?
Well, actually, that was Kevin. I didn't do the Crypt Keeper. I did everything else and sort of, kind of, not really.
So what we thought we would do on our first panel is we thought we'd get naked for you.
Hey! You first, Alan.
That's the reaction we get?
No! On Tales from the Crypt, we did quite a bit of nudity. Now, one of the things that that was really unusual about Tales from the Crypt, it really was like catching lightning in a bottle. Because really, prior to Tales from the Crypt, TV was one world and features were something else completely. The two did not mix. You'd get the occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams who'd go from TV into features, but no one went from features into TV. The one thing that HBO, they had 2 TV shows on before Tales from the Crypt. There was Brian Benben's show, and there was First and 10, and they both were TV shows with nudity and language. Tales from the Crypt changed everything because we weren't just a regular TV show. And yeah, we had nudity, we had language, but we had big Hollywood movie makers as well. And so it changed TV entirely. Nudity was something that, it was part of our stock and trade. It was why I think people tuned in to see Tales from the Crypt, because we'd go wherever the story would take us. But when you do nudity, it can be challenging, not only to the actors who have to do it, but it can be challenging to everybody involved in the process because it requires some delicacy. one of the things that Sherrie did that was remarkable was that you were so willing to get, when I say the word naked, I don't mean naked in the flesh, I mean naked emotionally. Because both parts, when you, the first episode that you ever did was the Billy Friedkin episode, on a dead man's chest. And in that one, there was a ton of nudity.
Yes, there was. Yeah.
When did that, was that a problem when you took the role? Did that scare you in any way?
Well, I mean, it's always challenging to be naked on set and be vulnerable and exposed in that way. But when you know the part requires it, you kind of just have to lean into it and do it. You know, you can't like then come on and have reservations and all that. And William Friedkin was very adamant about how he wanted things done. So you just roll with the direction of what it was. You don't question it.
When we had a really cool special effect that involved your breast.
Yes.
A very, very cool special effect. Todd, now the episode on a dead man's chest was about a tattoo artist, a rock and roll musician who gets a tattoo from a very strange tattoo artist whose tattoos, well, he will tell you what your tattoo is going to be. And the tattoos come to life. And there was a tattoo that your character had involving a tongue on your breast.
Yes. So they actually put the tattoo, like the placement of the tattoo across my chest.
Right.
And then the prosthetic that he made, prosthetic of my chest, and then my head kind of was over the prosthetic, and then the tongue of the snake came out, which was the impetus to tell the character to kill Tia Carrera. Right? Heavy D was the tattoo artist, and he put the tattoo, he kind of sees in your soul like what's going on with you, and he puts the tattoo on your body of what is going on inside of you. But Todd just made the body and the tongue, and you can speak more to that.
Heavy D wouldn't help us at all with the actual prosthetic. We actually had to make it. And so to do that, we had to bring you into our North Hollywood studio. And I remember you and I just being really comfortable about it. And you were just very matter of fact, well, here we are, boom. These are my breasts, let's get busy. And I had a very young assistant at the time. It was his first day on the job. And I had just not even thought about it. It's like, he's going to help me mold this lady's breasts. And I don't know if you and I had met before, but it was just...
I don't think we had.
But we were like, it was like just work. And Dave, the young assistant who just came in literally off the turnip truck from Kentucky, was a little shocked that that's how Hollywood rolled. So it was an interesting afternoon, I think, for him. But then when we made the piece, we actually made that tongue almost like a miniature party favor. You know, we go, and it was rigged up the same way with air, because of course this was, you know, long before CG. Everything actually had to be there right on set and actually function, you know, on cue.
By the way, as you're saying this, I just realized, because so I have my head, and then there's this body on almost like a pole. My body's on a pole, and then there's someone down here that's blowing with a tube that's blowing out the tongue. And I'm like, oh, okay, like, you know, and you're like, I mean, you're like day one. And I actually think, by the way, with nudity and all that, there's a lot of times where you kind of go like, you get the nudity out of the way, because sometimes people go, I'll shoot 5 days and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not going to do the nudity. And then there was a time in the era where you just go, let's get the nudity out of the way and then everything else. So I think with Tales, it was like, let's just get the nudity out of the way. Let's just do it. And then let's tell the story. I mean, the nudity is part of the story. That is why it's there.
It has to be organic to the story, or it's easy. It feels wrong. It plays wrong. Now, we had one in the dead weight episode. We bumped into a problem. We also bumped into in your episode. We'll start on your episode. Billy Friedkin directed you and Yul Vasquez in a sex scene that was very intense. Yes. And he really wanted you to be as raw. How did he direct you? What was he pushing you to do?
He wanted it to be very raw, unique, authentic, genuine, and instigating. Where I was instigating him to get agitated. So it's like, I'm like pushing his buttons at the same time as I'm pushing the sexual buttons. So it's like that dichotomy that we're both doing at the same time. And there's a lot of nudity involved.
A ton of nudity.
And I remember what I was saying in the podcast where it was like the center, kept putting the hanger in the back. Well, the hanger is like nobody cares about the hanger. If you were looking at the hanger, we're looking at the wrong thing. Because there was so much intensity between what we were doing and, kind of the story we were trying to tell. Because what I was doing was instigating him basically to go kill Tia Carrera's character.
Right.
That was the instigation. So it was just like,
Well, apparently you must have instigated him very, very well, because when Yul got up in the shot, he had an erection. And we didn't know about this. When we hired Billy Friedkin to direct Tales from the Crypt, Billy had a reputation as being the kind of guy who would eat producers for lunch, especially TV people. But we didn't have a problem. Hey, we worked for Joel Silver, for Christ's sake. We worked with a monster. There's no way that Billy could possibly be more monstrous than Joel. And actually working with Billy was great fun. We really enjoyed working with Billy. He could be a challenge, but we knew that HBO was, they were worried a little bit. And so when Billy shot this very intense sex scene with Sherry and Yul, and they sent the dailies into HBO, we didn't know, Gil and I, that there was a shot where suddenly Yul gets out of bed and his erect penis bobs up into the bottom of the shot. And we got a call from HBO thinking, did you guys tell Billy that he could do this? Because they said they were convinced that Billy Friedkin wanted to put an erect penis on HBO, which at the time HBO did not do. They would show breasts and they would show a little bit of pubic hair, but back in the day, penises were verboten. There were no penises, and certainly not Yul's erect one bobbing up. But that wasn't the only time that ever happened to us. Do you remember, Gil?
I'm so sorry, by the way.
No, it was great acting. Great acting did it.
I'm not sure if that was acting. It was pure instinct.
Back in season, our first season on the show, because Gil and I went aboard Crypt on season 3. And the first episode that we wrote that got produced was a thing called Deadweight that Toby Hooper directed, Whoopi Goldberg, James Remar, Vanity, and John Rhys Davies. Well, there's a scene about halfway through where James Remar's character seduces Vanity's character, and there's a very intense sex scene. And Toby Hooper had designed a great shot. It was called a oneer, and there was the whole scene is one shot. It started out it took place in the tropics, and so there was they were making love on a bed surrounded by mosquito netting, and the shot would start again. It was a oneer, and so Toby had to get the whole thing in one shot. It started on the very top of the mosquito netting, and then Toby would yell "Vanity," and Vanity would sit up into the shot, naked from the waist up, and she's having sex with James Remar. She's on top of him. And at some point, Toby would yell, "Now, Vanity, come!" And Vanity would have her orgasm, and then she'd collapse onto James Remar's chest. They'd have some dialogue, and then James would get up and walk out of the shot. And again, it was a oneer. And after a couple of hours of setting it up and finally trying to get it to go, one mistake after another, that it couldn't get the shot wasn't good because this screwed up and that screwed up, and now of course we're running out of time. You gotta, and Gil is an amazing producer, and at some point he's looking at his watch going, okay, Toby, we can't do the oneer anymore, man, we're gonna have to break this up into, do a master and some coverage. We got to get this in. And Toby begged us, please, 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 one more chance. And we said, okay. So everyone, all the producers were gathered around Video Village watching what was going to be Toby's last chance to get this shot. And he says, action! And we're on this mosquito netting, and we tilt down, and he says, Vanity! And Vanity sits up into the shot, and she's riding, and it's going great. And he says, no, come! And she simulates her orgasm, and she slowly eases down onto his chest, and they have their dialogue. It's going great. The scene is going perfectly. And finally, there's the end of the scene. There's some gunfire off in the distance, and he sets up, and he gets up out of the bed, and his erect penis bobs up into the bottom of the shot. And we all saw it. We all saw it, Baba, but we pretended we didn't.
Because we had no money or time to shoot another one.
But we were dreading that's what we had seen. And finally, the shot finishes, and we approached Toby. We said, look, we're not sure, but we think his penis bobbed up into the shot. We're going to have to... That's it. That was it. That was the last chance. And he begged us. He begged us, and we relented. We did one more take, and James Remar's penis fortunately stayed where it had to stay.
For years, we were known as the dick producers because of those two things.
There you go.
You still are.
Still are. You had something with Vanity on that?
Toby came to me one day and he said, I gotta talk to you. And he's very serious. And we were really good friends. And I said, what's that? He came into my office, closed the door, and he said, I gotta talk to you about Vanity. And I said, okay, what's the matter? And he said, well, she came to me and we were doing the shot, and she said to me, you need to sleep with me. And Toby looked at me and I said, yeah. And he said, what should I do? I said, you're asking me what you should do? How does this relate to what I do? I'm the producer of the show. I have nothing to do with you two. And I'm not replacing you because I'm married. So I am not sure what you want from me. Do what you need to do, but make sure you get the day's work.
We had an interesting nudity situation with Meatloaf. In the episode...
you gotta go there.
Yeah, we're going to do the Meatloaf story. What's Cooking? If you remember the What's Cooking episode, it's about
Christopher Reeve
and Bess Armstrong play a couple who own a failing diner that only serves squid. And they've got a homeless guy who works for them who suggests barbecue. And he has a recipe. He ends up murdering their landlord. And there's a scene where the landlord is hanging in the meat locker. Well, we ended up hiring the singer Meatloaf to play the landlord. And it was an episode about cannibalism, and I don't know, it was just a funny idea to hire a performer named Meatloaf to be in your episode about cannibalism. But when we hired Meatloaf, and look, that was a very cool thing. When I was in college in the 80s, we tripped out on Bat Outta Hell. We loved that album. And so to work with Meatloaf was great, but as we all thought of Meatloaf, when we hired him, he was a heavy-set guy. He was a big guy. And unfortunately in order to create the body cast that was going to be hanging in the meat locker, and there was a gag where Judd Nelson's character, the homeless guy, cuts off a couple of butt steaks that they're going to serve, because that's the meat that they're serving. But in order to make the body cast, we needed how much time for a body cast of that size?
Well, I think we were doing it in like a week back then. We were really going fast.
Wow, really? That was still tight.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
But we weren't going to have Meatloaf for a week.
He came in really late.
He came in 2 days before,
fresh off of Jenny Craig's diet.
Well, we did not know. So now, when we had to hire a body double to do the body cast for Meatloaf.
Very big man.
So we hired someone who we thought looked like Meatloaf. He was a big, heavy-set guy. And it was a great body cast. It looks fantastic. It's really great. Well, all right, so then 2 days before the shoot, Meatloaf comes in to walk into wardrobe, and the man just lost 80 pounds on the Jenny Craig diet.
It's like Ozempic all over.
Yeah. He looked great.
He hated us so badly.
But the problem is, but then he wanted to see the body cast that we had done, and you showed him the heavy set, the big guy.
You're talking about the nudity part.
Yeah, the nudity part.
Okay, well, so it's not TV, it's HBO, right? That was the slogan back then, and we didn't feel like we could make a full naked dummy of a character and make him like a Ken doll. You know, he had to have something. And so what we started talking about just the scene, and it's like, well, he's in an icebox, why would he have a big schlong? And we're certainly not going to put a big schlong if we're not going to shoot it, so we made something small. And not thinking like we're going to embarrass him or anything, but Judd latched on to this whole thing about the fact that meat was not only now fat again, but now had no Johnson. And so Judd starts taking the meatloaf dummy into the craft service room and starts doing a series of Polaroids with Judd butt fucking. Just as a joke. Says, please tell Judd I say hello.
I'll talk to him tomorrow.
These Polaroids were going around set, and Meatloaf was getting so mad because it was, you know, we were all just a bunch of just whack-holes back then. We were just a bunch of kids. And this was us having fun, you know, here we are, hey, let's rip Meatloaf. He wasn't laughing at that point. And what was it, 15, 20 years later, his daughter comes in and works with us on Carnival. And we had to actually make a dummy body of her. We brought her in. We did not do a double.
What was her name? What would you refer to her as, Little Loaf?
That was Cyndi Lauper.
Cyndi Lauper called her Little Loaf.
Mini Loaf.
Mini Loaf.
Maybe it was Little Loaf. It was Little Loaf.
Little
You're right.
Loaf. Little Loaf.
Yeah, and she was great. And she made for a great dummy. But the funny thing is she came in well aware of that story. She knew that story from Meat's perspective.
Oh, God.
And I heard it nonstop for the many weeks that we were working with her. It was just like, he's probably still cursing. Well, he's still cursing.
While we were waiting to go on, we hung out with Tales from the Crypt alum and fellow HorrorCon participant, actor Kevin Dillon. We also caught up with Crypt alum Jake Busey. Jake also did the Dead Easy table read for charity with us. Saturday at HorrorCon was a really good day. No, it was a great day. As Sunday, day 2 of the convention dawned, Gil awoke feeling ill and very prudently decided to stay home. That left just me, my son Tristan, and ED TAPIA to hold down the fort. I think we did a pretty good job. Sunday's visitors, if you can believe it, were even nicer than Saturday's. I loved getting to have quality FaceTime with so many people. And among the people I bumped into and connected with was Sean Cassidy, not the musician, Lurch's son. Look, I'm not a starfucker in any way, shape, or form. I'm not. But Sean's dad, Ted Cassidy, aside from playing Lurch in the original Addams Family, appears in one of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite movies. He's Harvey Logan in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
With you, Harvey.
Anything you say, Butch.
And then, oh so ironically, Butch Cassidy kicks Ted Cassidy in the nuts.
No, not yet. Not until me and Harvey get the rules straightened out.
Rules? In a knife fight? No rules.
Well, if there ain't gonna be any rules, let's get the fight started. Someone count 1, 2, 3, go.
1, 2, 3, go.
Stay tuned, kiddies. Sean Cassidy will be a guest on this very podcast in the very near future. For our Sunday panel, since it was just me and Ed, we moved the chairs from the stage to the floor and drew the audience in closer. We wanted them to feel like we were shooting the shit with them, which was exactly what we were doing.
We did okay, Tales from the Crypt. When Gil and I went aboard before Ed joined us, the 3rd season was supposed to be the last. And between Gil and I, we turned around not only the show, but we reinvented the Crypt Keeper. Before Gil and I joined Tales from the Crypt, the Crypt Keeper was the puppet. He wore the same thing. He sat in the same set, basically said the same 5 jokes. And I went aboard. My question to Joel was, what does the Crypt Keeper do when he's not being the Crypt Keeper? when he punches the clock at the end of the day, as we all do, and he goes home to his own crypt, well, what's that like? What's he like to do? What are his hobbies? What are TV shows that he like to watch? What does he like to eat? Who are his friends? And that's what we did. And that turned everything around, and suddenly we got, HBO ordered a bunch more seasons, and Universal ordered a couple of Tales from the Crypt movies, feature films. And we got right to work because that was very exciting to do. And the first one we did was I think a really good movie called Demon Knight. Perhaps you all remember Demon Knight, Billy Zane and Jada Pinkett Smith. A terrific movie. Ernest Dickerson directed. It is it's a classic.
And it was a wonderful experience to work on. I mean, it was difficult like any show is, but we had great cast, we had great locations, we had a great director.
It was like Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
it was mostly our Tales from the Crypt crew on that one too.
Exactly so. Well, the order was to do 3 features. So Demon Knight was very successful. And so Universal said, yeah, go do your second movie. We had a script that we all loved, and we were working on it. It was called Dead Easy. It was a psychological thriller that took place in New Orleans. And Universal paid for us to go to New Orleans for 6 weeks. We were 3 weeks from starting principal photography on Dead Easy when suddenly Universal changed its mind and they said, no, you're not going to make Dead Easy, you're going to make this other thing. It's called Bordello of Blood.
And I got to tell you, when I first heard that, I was like, what?
And by the way, they pointed out, our start date when we started to film it was tied to our release date, which was the following Halloween. So Halloween didn't change, so our release date didn't change, so we still had 3 weeks to start principal photography on a script we had never seen before. And so we were basically forced to do Bordello of Blood. We could have quit, but then we would have not gotten to do Tales from the Crypt anymore. We couldn't do that, so we figured we'd fix it the best we possibly could. We thought we would turn Bordello of Blood into something. The problem was every decision, once you start making a movie you don't want to make, there are no good decisions. And literally, it began a chain of events where every day became stupider than the day before it. Now, Gil and I, we needed to cast our movie, and we had in mind for our lead, what was he called? Danny Baldwin. Danny. We wanted to cast Danny Baldwin as a small town detective. And Joel said, no, I'm going to cast your leads for you. And working for Joel Silver is a remarkable experience because he's a larger-than-life guy who he does things his own way, and you're not going to stop him. Well, he wanted to cast the leads, and for some reason he had it in his head that he had to have Dennis Miller. Now, Dennis Miller's a very funny guy, but Dennis Miller is not, his audience and our audience are not the same audience. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why Dennis Miller is in our movie. All right, that was the first problem. The second problem was the villain. The villain in a horror movie, as everybody knows, you gotta cast Freddy Krueger right. If you don't, Robert Englund was brilliant. If it had been
Joe Smith,
it wouldn't have been the same. Well, we had in mind a terrific actress named Robin Givens. And we wanted Robin Givens to be the villain in Bordello of Blood. And Joel said, no, I got a better idea. Now, at this particular time, Joel was shooting another movie in Seattle called Assassins that starred Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone.
Directed by another one of the Crypt partners, Dick Donner.
And so this was part of the Crypt family. Well, Joel made the decision for us that we weren't going to make Bordello of Blood in Los Angeles, we were going to go make it in Vancouver.
Which none of us wanted to go to.
We didn't, but the reason we went to Vancouver was because Joel was always fighting with the IA, the union that represented our crew. And sometimes the union was winning and sometimes Joel was winning. Right now the union was winning and Joel wanted to give to the union, so he said, I'm going to take this movie away from you. I'm going to make it somewhere else. And so the reason that we went to Vancouver to make Bordello of Blood is because it wasn't Los Angeles. This was in July that we were going to start making our movie.
Now, the thing about Vancouver, Canada in July, have you ever been that far north at the height of summer? You know what the sun does? It stays up really long.
We had 6 hours of night.
When you're making a horror movie, the thing your stock in trade is nighttime. Nighttime. And we went to a place where there was 3 hours of shootable dark every night.
And it gets better because we chose a building that was all glass.
Well, the climax took place in the Crystal Cathedral, a glass church. So, but again, we were not making decisions as movie makers for organic movie decisions. All right, so Joel is making his movie in Seattle. We're going to be shooting in Vancouver. And Joel had he had produced a movie that hadn't come out yet called Fair Game. Now, I don't know if you remember Fair Game. It starred Cindy Crawford. And Joel was convinced that he was on the cusp of starting the greatest new trend in movies, supermodels as movie stars. And so at that time, Sylvester Stallone was engaged to a lovely person, a supermodel named Angie Everhart. And Angie, a lovely, lovely person, supermodel. She had acted in a couple of movies, but she was not really ready to do this. But Sly Stallone one day on the set of Assassins approached Joel and he said, "Hey Joel, I got a great idea. You want to put my girlfriend Angie in your movie, that way we could visit each other across the border, okay? And Joel, wanting to keep his big star happy, said yes, because the big star on his movie was way more important than anything on our little horror movie. And so he said, yeah, okay, we'll make Angie the villain of your movie. Well, Gil and I, we lost our minds because, first of all, we wanted Robin Gibbons, but more importantly, we were desperately, the last thing you want is to have your villain miscast. So we knew that Angie had worked for Billy Friedkin on a movie called Jade. So Billy had done an episode of Tales from the Crypt. We were friendly with Billy. We called Billy on the phone. We said, Billy, Joel has got us, he wants us to cast Angie as the villain in our movie. Well, what do you think? He said, she was great in a small part in my movie. We took that to Joel. We said, Joel, the guy who directed The Exorcist said, don't hire this person. And Joel, well, that was not the point. The point was not our movie. The point was keeping Sly Stallone happy. Now, and then we read it. We did everything we possibly could, and Joel would not relent. So in the end, we had to cast Angie. Now, the thing we didn't know was that Sly had an ulterior motive for wanting Angie to be on our movie, and it wasn't so that they could visit each other every weekend. He was actually a little closer. Yeah, he was actually seeing someone else, and we would get calls on our set because after the first couple of weekends, they called our production office. They said, "Is there any way you could hold Angie over the weekend?" We said, "To do what? To homework? What?" We heard another story from their set. Now, this is real inside baseball. This is a story that really it's one of those inside showbiz stories we all know. This happened. Now, Sylvester Stallone, like he's here, has never denied that this story happened. The only question has been on what set did it take place. He's doing a shot on Assassins, and he's unaware as he finishes the shot and goes back to his trailer that his wireless lavalier mic is still working. It's still broadcasting back to the cart. And so he goes into his trailer where a young woman is waiting for him, and she begins to service him. And he's very vocal apparently. And he's broadcasting all this back to the sound card, and now all the crew is gathering around the sound card listening to him go, "Stroke the shaft, cup the balls, cup the balls." The next day, Sylvester Stallone shows up on the set, and the entire crew are wearing T-shirts that say, "Stroke the shaft, cup the balls." This really happened. Don't tell anybody else, please. Please, I'm swearing you all to secrecy. You never heard this story from me. All right.
And when we got to Vancouver, it was a bit of a culture shock because, sadly, Well, let's put it this way. How many remember Corey Feldman from the 80s? Corey Feldman was our most professional actor on the set.
Absolutely was.
And yeah, exactly. It was the most difficult herding of actors that I think any producers have ever had to do.
Well, because we didn't cast the three leads. You know, we didn't cast Dennis, and Dennis, you know, all right, I'll try to be fair to Dennis.
Don't be. He was a dick.
Dennis was a real, you know, very talented, funny man, but
A lot of demons.
Oh,
He's fighting with a lot of
he visits
demons.
them on everybody he works with.
Yeah.
So, the first day that Dennis shows up on our set, we were the third day of production. We were on location at a strip joint in Vancouver, and I am keenly aware of the fact that this script. Look, why Bordello of Blood? Well, here's the thing about Bordello. Bordello was the first student movie that our executive producer Bob Zemeckis and his writing partner Bob Gale ever wrote together when they were at USC Film School. Now the reason that, all right, we'll backtrack. Here's why we did Bordello of Blood. Back in the mid-1990s, a new company called DreamWorks started. And when DreamWorks started, that was Steven Spielberg, who was at Universal, left Universal to create his own company, but they were still on the Universal lot. They began to make talent deals, so they had other people that they could do product, to do movie and TV shows with. And Universal was desperately afraid of losing another huge talent, our executive producer, Bob Zemeckis. And so Universal approached Bob and said, Bob, we love you at Universal, what can we do to stay at Universal and the family? And I don't know what other deal points they made. Obviously, Bob stayed, but one of the deal points that Bob Zemeckis made to stay at Universal was, hey, if you were to buy the first script that Gail and I ever wrote, Bordello of Blood with USC for $500,000, that would make me happy. The thing about Bob Z, he's wonderful. He is the nicest man, the greatest collaborator. Oh, I would walk through the seventh valley of hell to work with that guy. He's incredibly loyal, very loyal to his first screenwriting partner, Bob Gale, with whom he wrote all the Back to the Future movies and a couple other projects. And Bob Gale's a very talented man, but he hasn't had anything like the success that Bob Zemeckis has had. So he was always trying to help Gale put more money in his pocket. So this was, all right, $500,000 for the student film. There was $250,000 in his friend's pocket. That was the point, that was the deal he made. It had nothing to do with us. But Universal's now, they had just eaten $500,000 for a screenplay that's just going to sit there. They thought to themselves, well, wait a minute. Bob's the executive producer of this horror movie that he's making under our banner. Well, we don't care about that stupid script that they're doing. It only cost us a couple $1,000. Screw it. Throw that out. You'll do Bordello of Blood instead.
What?
So the reason we did Bordello of Blood was because of a deal point that had nothing to do with us. And so we knew as Dennis Miller walked onto the set that very first day, and I handed him the script that we had rewritten from a student script. Within 3 weeks, there's, you know, one of the problems in the movie is the main character, the hero, is a small town detective. Now think about this from a writing point of view. How much business is a small town detective going to do? It's not logical. That guy doesn't exist. So we couldn't really write a character because we couldn't imagine who that person was. So really, all the dialogue is really just to move the story along. I knew as I handed, Dennis Miller, a very famous comedian, that the script I was handing him was not a funny script, that his dialogue did not sound like Dennis Miller. And so Dennis takes the script, and we meet each other and we have some small talk, and he makes a joke about an obscure character actor whose name I knew, and and he looked at me and went, "Cassie, you're okay." And I thought, cool. Dennis and me are going to be okay. We're going to work together just fine on this project. And I hand him the script, and he opens it to his first line, and he looks at it, and he says, "I can't say that. I'm not going to say that." He said, "You know what? I'm not going to do any of the dialogue here. I'm going to improvise all my dialogue." And there was nothing we could say. And so Dennis went on to improvise every last line of dialogue that he had. Now that meant when he was working with the other actors, well, his improvs didn't necessarily line up with their dialogue, and they kind of felt, well, what are we supposed to do with this?
And meanwhile, the script supervisor, he's got the hardest job on any movie, but the script supervisor is quickly scribbling down his improvs. Now, Dennis, if you remember, was shooting, he had an HBO show long before Bill Maher. He had an HBO show that was political, and they rehearsed on Thursdays, they shot on Fridays. And so we had to flip our work week. We had hired our Canadian crew to work a regular week. That's what they agreed to. Well, now we hired an actor who, frankly, they hated just as much as we were starting to hate to work a schedule that they didn't agree to. And Dennis would like I said, he would go down to LA on Thursdays and Fridays, and we would try to get him back in time on Mondays. And sometimes he'd fly in late. He would send his assistant to me every day, first thing in the morning. She'd say, Dennis is so tired, can we just shoot him out? And, then he'll go back to the hotel and rest. And that's what we ended up having to do. So we would shoot every scene Dennis's side first. Okay? And Dennis would do all these improv dialogues with the other actors working behind the camera to Dennis. And then we do lunch. We change, you have to change the lighting, so it's called turning around, and we shoot the other side. But Dennis would then go back to his hotel. And all the other actors would have to do their scenes working to the script supervisor, trying to read her scribbles of his improvised dialogue. And an awful lot of the time, stuff that Dennis was supposed to say to advance the plot, he didn't want to say, so it never made it into the movie.
And it didn't make sense.
And the other actors' dialogue, sometimes it just didn't make sense with what Dennis was saying. Although Dennis would try, but whole pieces of information just never made it into the movie. Dennis... And little by little, the other cast members started resenting it, obviously, because they're showing up for their 10, 12 hours of work, and this MFer is leaving after 5, pretty much every day. Yeah. And it got to the point where... Well, among the people who Corey Feldman has said was such a professional, and for all the things that showbiz did to that poor guy while he was a kid, he's still very professional and a real pleasure to work with. He tried to be as professional as he could with Dennis. He tried to bond with Dennis. You could work together for a couple of weeks, and Dennis just blew him off. Well, we did a night shoot towards the end of our schedule at an old abandoned power plant outside of Vancouver, and there was a fight scene. And when we went to rehearse it, and the fight scene was between Corey's character and Dennis's character. And as they went to rehearse it, I think Corey said something that pissed Dennis off, and Dennis took a swing at Corey. And then Corey went to Dennis. And just when you think someone, maybe the first or someone in the crew would jump in to defend your star, to at least stop from being hit, nobody went to Dennis Miller's defense. In fact, they began cheering for Corey. This is how not to make a movie, everybody. Let me just see what our time frame is. How much more time do we have? We have 5 more minutes. Okay, well, yeah, we're good. We could go on all night with these stories. Are you all enjoying these? Okay, we're taking you inside baseball here.
And Alan has a podcast called How to Not Make a Movie, and the first season is in detail about the making of Bordello Blood.
If you really want to hear all the dirt, and man, there's some great stuff. We're just scratching the surface here. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast. Come visit us at the Tales from the Crypt booth. We'll show you how to get there. We've got a QR code. Take you right there.
And the one thing for me too, though, is I hadn't done a lot of features before I started working with the Tales from the Crypt guys. I was mostly in television, and after Demon Night being such a remarkable experience, it was shocking how dysfunctional. That's the word I'm going to use. How dysfunctional the production was. I love my job. I mean, I'm happiest on a set.
I'm going to tell one more story. The Joel crossing the border story.
That
involves you.
Yeah, that's part. Yeah.
We're going to tell, this is our last story. We'll tell this, but this is all right. So Joel, as we said, was making a movie in Seattle, just south of the Canadian border. And one day, Joel Gill, who could not be here today, he was not feeling well.
Gil directed the movie. My partner at the time, Gil, was directing the movie, and he had been needling Joel to come visit him. He said, you make it. Donner doesn't need you on his set. He knows how to make movies. This was the first movie that Gil had ever directed. He said, you should be up here. And Joel would put him off. And finally, one day, Joel calls Gil. Gil's in the middle of a shot.
We actually didn't know. We didn't know he was coming.
We had no idea. Yeah. We got a phone call from Joel. I'm on my way to Vancouver.
He's in the air on the Warner's jet.
All right, so he's flying over the border, and he says, oh, by the way, I don't have any ID.
No passport, no driver's license, no cash.
Crossing an international border with no ID whatsoever.
And what does he tell Gil? Call Canada and let them know I'm coming in.
And Gil says, but no, there's no one going to do anything. There's what do you expect them to do? He says, well, if they don't let me in, I'm going to pull the movie. All right, so
we don't know what happens after that, but suddenly he's pulling up.
But before we even get there, so he lands at Vancouver International Airport, and the customs people there, when he says, "I'm Joel Silver, don't you know who I am?" They say, "We don't know who you are," which is the right answer, and they held him for an hour and a half. And after an hour and a half now, our production manager was a lovely person named Colleen Neistat.
Colleen Neistat.
And Colleen was well connected to all the city government there in Vancouver, and somebody there in the customs office knew her and knew that she was producing a movie and thought that this might be that their problem, might be our problem. And so she called Colleen and said, "Will you vouch that this person is who he says he is?" And she said, "Yes, he is Joel Silver. Release him to me, if you would, please." And so, on the word of our Canadian production manager, Canadian Customs released Joel Silver. But they were holding him in one part of the airport, and we were waiting for him in another part of the airport. And so, between there and there, it was like the Tasmanian devil ripping through a place. And by the time he got onto our van, he was ready to rip everyone he bumped into a brand new asshole. Now, before coming to set, the first place that they took Joel to was our production office. Colleen had found this really cool, it was an old GM parts plant that had been abandoned. It was huge. How many square feet was it? Like
200,000.
200,000 square feet. I mean, we needed a pittance of it, but Colleen wanted Joel to see our production facilities and meet our production staff. Colleen was very professional and really wanted Joel to see that the movie that he was the executive producer of, that she was working on, that this Canadian crew was up to Hollywood standards. Well, Joel, when he got off the van, was still the Tasmanian devil. And he went through our production facility like a bomb. The entire production staff is female. I got a call from my assistant. I was on location that I better get back right now because our entire staff was about to quit. They were heading to the parking lot.
They packed their desks and were on the way to their cars.
By the time I got to our offices, Joel was gone, and I literally were our staff in the office. I was on my knees begging him. I said, "Look, I don't know what I can do to make this up to you. Please don't quit. Please don't quit." By the time I got to the set, Joel was tormenting Gil, and he had quite forgotten that that was another problem. He didn't mean anything to me. That he had nearly caused our entire staff to quit.
And the button to that is that when Joel had to leave, there's a little glitch. When you leave Canada, you have to pay an exit tax in cash. He had no money. I had to pay it. He still owes me that money to this day.
It was a great weekend. Would have been even better, of course, if Gil hadn't gotten sick, but in life, as in movie productions, you zig when you have to and zag when you must. And hope like hell that everything works out. And oftentimes it does. Like it did for us at HORRORCON LA 23. It was so much fun. Hey, see you next time, everybody. I want to give a quick shout out to executive producer Jason Stein. This episode could not have been made without him. Thank you, Jason. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.